This is the third video of my Picasso series and his appearance in the film Eyes Wide Shut. Now in the film Eyes Wide Shut, at the end, in the sex ritual, in the satanic ritual, you have a Picasso mask. And the Picasso mask shows a pyramid with an all-seeing eye. This tells us that Picasso was part of the elite's rituals. He used to be an attendee. But not only that, what I'll argue in this video is that Picasso was a high voodoo priest and someone who knew these rituals and performed them, and that his paintings are about human sacrifice and also the sacrifice of art to create a new art. And it's part of the occult agenda in which we're living today, where you have transhumanism, which is part of the agenda to recreate humanity. Now we have here the Picasso mask in the film Eyes Wide Shut, and this is Stanley Kubrick telling us that Picasso was a member of this occult group. Now Picasso was friends with people like Jean Cocteau and the composer Eric Satie, who were both occultists, and this was an environment of the occult in French artistic society where you had people like Victor Hugo also doing necromancy. And all this is fact, this is not made up. Okay, so you have the Picasso mask. Now we're going to have a look at this documentary by John Richardson, who was Picasso's chief biographer, and the program is called Picasso, Sex, Magic and Death. And we will see that it's full of references to human sacrifice, and that Picasso's work is about sacrifice and magic and sex rituals, just like the film Eyes Wide Shut. So you have the introduction where we see Picasso making something, and it shows you that Picasso was making some kind of voodoo sculpture.
He was impeccable. He was trained academically by his father. He would never make a silly technical mistake. He didn't have to have the palette and the little painting.
So Picasso is making a voodoo sculpture on the floor.
He was, doing something else. He was, wreaking havoc.
And then suddenly you discover, after all, you thought it might become a woman, but actually it's a goat.
So there you have a women and the reference to the Baphomet. And I'll expose this even more later on.
His pen goes on and transforms it into a fish. It's a never-ending process. And that was what was interesting to him, to see where his mind would take him. You know what it is? Voodoo. Do you understand voodoo?
So there you go. Picasso's paintings is about voodoo. It's about spiritual communication, and it's also about transformation. Okay, now here we have the next clip, in which John Richardson talks about Picasso's sister. Sorry, here we have a next clip showing you a Baphomet goat that Picasso made.
To bronze, which he always felt was museum-y and expensive and grand and too luxurious.
So notice that this goat is actually both sexes, so the udders of the goat could actually be testicles, and it's read that way.
I think Picasso always felt that his sculptures were magical in some respect, that they were like a witch doctor's fetishes, they were shamans' creations. Do you agree with that?
I think they were very dear to him. I mean, actually, he never parted from his sculptures. Actually, he never parted from the originals. And usually, there were, two of each made, and one he kept and one was for sale, so that he could always hang on to them. And they were very much, part of the mobilier of the furniture.
He used to sit on the couch at the California.
So there you have John Richardson saying that Picasso saw himself as a shaman, and his goat is like a Baphomet. Now we have the death of Picasso's younger sister, Conchita, who died of diphtheria in a Spanish city called La Coruña. And Picasso made a promise. He said, if she lives, then I'll give up painting, but she died. And so he became Picasso. And so what he's saying is that the genius of Picasso was based on his sister's death and sacrifice.
Picasso's last wife, Jacqueline, told me a story which Picasso told only to the women in his life. And it involves the death of Picasso's youngest sister, Conchita, in 1895, who is buried here. Her family were too poor to provide a gravestone for her, so we don't know exactly which one it is, but there are these little numbered crosses, and maybe one of those refers to her. Now, Conchita developed diphtheria. There was an outbreak of diphtheria in La Coruña, and in those days it was a very fatal disease. There was a serum which was available in Paris, newly developed, newly invented serum, and while they were waiting for the serum to arrive, Picasso, age 13, made a vow to God that if his sister, whom he particularly loved, Conchita, lived, he would never paint again. The trouble was that he did paint again, and Conchita died. The result was that for the rest of his life, young women, young girls, in a way had to be sacrificed on the altar of Picasso's art. And it explains his relationships with so many women, it explains his identification with the Minotaur, the figure to whom girls, virgins, maidens had to be sacrificed.
So there you have it, that Picasso's art is about sacrifice. Not only the sacrifice of art itself, the way art was painted in the past, but also the sacrifice of women, sexual relationships. And he identifies himself as the Minotaur, the horned god of the Minoans. So the Minoan civilization is associated with the Minotaur, and they used to sacrifice virgins and people to the Minotaur. So you have that sacrifice to the horned god. Also, the Minoans are thought to be derived from the king Nimrod, and it is Nimrod that built the Tower of Babel, and he was said to be a master of the occult. Now in England, you have an aircraft called Nimrod. You also have the composer Elgar, who wrote the Enigma Variations, and one of his most famous songs and anthems for the United Kingdom is called Nimrod. So it shows you again the association between this cult and what's going on today in the United Kingdom. And so let's go to the next clip, where Picasso talks about Picasso's interest in tarot cards.
3 years after Picasso James blew his brains out, Picasso set to work on a puzzling allegory to be called La Vie. Until recently, it had been something of a mystery. Why was Picasso James holding his hand out like that? Why was Germaine clinging to him? What was all this about? I think I've solved the problem. The answer has to do with Picasso's recent experience and discovery of tarot cards. Anyone familiar with occult iconography will recognize the upward and downward gesture. It symbolizes the most famous of all mystical axioms. Whatever is below is like that which is above, as all things are made from one. X-rays reveal that underneath the figure of Picasso James is a self-portrait. It was originally to be about himself. He chose the name La Vie, and characteristically turns La Vie upside down. What this painting is all about is death.
So there you can see how Picasso was influenced by the tarot cards. He was part of these occult secret societies, and in this painting you have an Adam and Eve-like scenario, and you also have what appears to be the fall of man. So it goes back to the fall of man and his temptation from the serpent, and again it's associated with Nimrod. Okay, and so you can see how occult Picasso actually was, and we'll have further proof here, where we're talking about the Harlequin, and Picasso saw the Harlequin as a satanic figure. It is also similar to the figure of the Fool in the tarot cards, but Picasso saw the Harlequin as a trickster. And it's interesting that Russell Brand has written a book called The Pied Piper, where he also presents this kind of trickster figure of the Harlequin.
Well, it's all about masking, and I'm sure that's...
So this tells you about how Picasso was very into the mask culture of Andalusia, where they used to wear masks at Carnival, and how you could hide your identity, exactly the same as in the film Eyes Wide Shut, and this explains the connection to the film Eyes Wide Shut.
So must have observed Carnival. You just see it in his paintings. The Harlequin, of course, is a figure there. And again, in Carnival, that figure can be a figure of fun, as you say, but also can shade off into a sinister, dangerous, threatening, menacing figure as well. If you have a mask on your face, if you're not seen, you can't be identified. This frees you. It frees.
So in this actual drawing, where he's saying how the masks frees you from being identified, you can get away with more. You actually have an all-seeing eye here, you have a mask here, and a girl naked, again showing you the scene from Eyes Wide Shut. And in the film Eyes Wide Shut, there's a character called Pan. And Picasso used to associate himself with Pan, and I'll explain this a bit more later.
Whatever you want. You're free to engage in whatever misbehavior you want, sexual or political or otherwise. And of course, masking lets you experiment with different identities. You can literally change yourself into something else.
And there you have the owl, of course, the symbol of secret societies. Now let's have this clip of the Mademoiselles d'Avignon, which was based on this painting by El Greco representing John the Evangelist and his vision of the apocalypse. And Picasso painted what he did was he painted a scene in a brothel, but he carved all the women up, showing you again a scene of human sacrifice, and it's to do with voodoo and black magic.
For the Demoiselle is virtually the same size as this painting. But that is not all. The extraordinary darkness of the Demoiselle, the malevolent feeling that one gets, the sense of evil, the sense of heaven and hell, all these things that Picasso was out in his search for magic to put into his imagery. I think all of this comes, in a way, from this great painting. Picasso had taken a cellar in the Bateau Lavoir, a dark cellar. It was very, very hot. He stripped naked in order to paint it. He was 5'3", the women about 8 foot tall, and night after night he would work away at this painting. His mistress Fernand locked away upstairs, as she said, waiting for Picasso, who would be in an ever worse temper. And then, while he was battling away with the Demoiselle, Picasso found a solution. He paid a visit to the Ethnographical Museum at the Trocadero, by accident, he always said. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Tribal art was to have an enormous impact, not only on the Demoiselle, but on Picasso's view of art as having a magic function. All alone in that ill-lit, filthy, smelly, cluttered museum, he later said, I understood that the Negroes used their sculpture as weapons. Art could kill, it could exorcise. Tribal art made Picasso understand why he was a painter. What's
struck me in the demoiselle was that the two evil demoiselles, the African ones, those that he said were inspired by African masks and figures in the Trocadero, and which were evil spirits, he don't know what it was. Only those two on the right, when you look at her, only those were mutilated and incomplete. He punished them magically on the canvas.
One is blinded, isn't she?
One is blinded.
In other words, Picasso saw himself as a shaman.
He saw himself as a shaman. Absolutely.
So it shows you there that Picasso saw himself as a voodoo shaman. He mutilated the figures in the paintings. They have black eyes. The black eye is to do with the evil eye and how he was influenced by voodoo ideas. And again, it relates to the film Eyes Wide Shut and that Picasso mask, and why Stanley Kubrick was showing us it, because Picasso was some kind of voodoo priest. And he used to take part in the 6 rituals of the elite. And notice that Picasso carved up the figures. So in the past you had painters like Titian who painted scenes like Dino and Actaeon. Now Dino and Actaeon, that painting by Titian, is actually a scene from a brothel, because it has a black woman in the scene of nudes of goddesses. And having a black woman there, that was common in the brothels of Venice. Now in that painting of Titian, Dino and Actaeon, it is based on a book called The Metamorphoses by Ovid. He was a Roman poet. And the idea is changing one form into another form, and it's also about mortals or demigods turning into gods. And that is a theme of the occult, as we're seeing in the world today with transhumanism, where they're trying to create a new being. And this is part of the occult, and it's part of the art of Picasso. And this is the final part, where we have Picasso painting on TV, and he paints a voodoo ritual. So what he does first, he paints a hen, and then he sacrifices the hen, and he paints a demonic figure on top, and it is a pan figure, a horned figure. And what this is that in voodoo you cut the animal's throat, and it creates a pathway to the gods. And there is a messenger god which communicates from the mortal to the world, to the supernatural world. Now in the Masonic book, the Kabbalion, that figure is Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes being the messenger of the god. Anyway, watch this and you will see Picasso doing a voodoo ritual on TV in plain sight, and Picasso is also shirtless, and this is what the priest does when he performs a voodoo ritual. So what's interesting is he draws 3 circles. Interestingly enough, they look like the CV19. They actually look like the CV19, but inside the 3 circles you have 6s. 6, 6, 6. So he draws a fish and then he draws a hen. He sacrifices the hen, and a demonic figure appears. The film also focuses on Picasso's eyes as if he's a magician, just like in the films of Sinbad, when the evil character in Sinbad is trying to create a spirit to inhabit a body.
Encore un petit peu, hein? Ouais. J'ai un peu triché pour te laisser du temps. Ça va, ça va.
So you have Picasso the magician, the voodoo magician, and he's going to paint a demonic figure. He sacrificed the hen, and a demonic figure comes through with red eyes. Looks like female figures, or people worshipping the Baphomet god. So there is the painting of the goat god. So I hope to have shown you why this mask is in Kubrick's film. It's because Picasso used to attend these 6 rituals held by the elite. And Picasso's art, where it's about transformation and metamorphosis, is part of the occult agenda in which they want to change man into a new being. And it's part of the alchemy, which has been going for thousands and thousands of years. Okay, thank you very much, and please watch my other videos on this subject, and I'll list them below this video. Thank you.